I think this is our last creepypasta here. Yeah.
The If you see a woman with a serrated smile.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like the sound of this one. Oh, it's a little bit of a lengthy boy too.
It's a lengthy boy. Yeah.
I read a super lengthy boy, so get after it.
Yeah. Um this is from r/NoSleep. If you see a woman with a serrated smile, you need to read this as a matter of life and death. By user Unborn Beach. Let me get a good drink of water. All right. I'm a government employee. My name isn't important to know. All you need to worry about is what I have to say. I work at a compound known as the facility. Within it, we perform research on things the public would find unappetizing. Officially, we're listed under the experimental weapons development, but lately our umbrella has been spread much wider. Wow, that coughing fit is lingering. I'm sorry. Suffice it to say that there are things out there that would go bump in the night. Things both legendary and mundane. They exert their influence upon us and defy explanation. My job is to wow. I am really struggling. let me get into a nice position here. My job is to interview the individuals who believe they've encountered such entities and determine the validity of their experiences. This is one such interview. The room is cramped, dimly lit, and smells vaguely of stale piss and black mold. A light hangs above the table between us, rocking back and forth and doing a poor job illuminating much of anything at all. Still, I can see the man's face and the fields of my clipboard. Clipboard. It's enough. It will do. Holy cow. 1 second. Goddamn Corona. I better not put that actual energy out into the world because guaranteed if I put that energy into the world, I'm going to get it. And that's not what I wanted to happen. I asked the man to tell me his story, and it begins. It happened when I visited her cabin, the man says. He's 29, with a long nose and 5 o'clock shadow. When he reaches for a cigarette, his hand shakes. Not my cabin. It belonged to her. But she invited the three of us up there. To get away from it all, I make a note on my clipboard. 4 individuals. He nods, taking a heavy drag on the smoke. Yeah, something like that. Get drunk, get stoned, forget about life for a while. He swallows, and his eyes dart to the cameras in the corner of the room. He scratches his cheek anxiously. It's a look I've seen before. Wow, this coughing... I'm sorry, guys. It's better if you tell me everything, I say, placing my clipboard on the desk between us. Strictly speaking, I'm not law enforcement. I'm not here to have you arrested. Sure, he says. Another long drag. He taps his finger on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. We were doing mushrooms too. At least Steven and I were. That's fine. I check a box on my clipboard labeled intoxicated. Tell me about the event. It happened late at night. The 4 of us had been drinking in the cabin, but we all slept outside in tents. You know, less spiders to deal with. The cabin wasn't exactly lived in year-round, so a lot of bugs would make their homes in it over the winter and spring. Just to confirm, you used the mushrooms while drinking? I steady my pencil on the form. On the box besides intoxicated that reads disqualified. That's a combination inviting hallucinations. Can we verify that, Rev?
Yes, it indeed is.
Look, it wasn't a hallucination, all right? The man seethes for a moment, clenches his hand into a fist while his lips make a thin line. Then he takes a breath and regains his composure. Sorry. Thinking about that night puts me on edge. Understandable, I say. Such reactions are to be expected after witnessing an event now and then. If you wouldn't mind clarifying my earlier question, did you consume the mushrooms while drinking? He shakes his head. No. The mushrooms happened several hours earlier. They weren't even a factor when... His eyes trail off, his eyes gazing at the ashtray on the table between us. There's an emptiness to them. A sort of disconnect. I wonder if he's thinking of the legend I suspect that he's encountered. I wonder if he's thinking of Jagged Janus. I clear my throat. But they weren't a factor in when the event occurred? Yeah, they'd worn off by then. You're positive? He gives me a look of disbelief. No, I'm fucking lying to you for the fun of it. Yes, I'm positive. Aggressive behavior, I remind him, will not be tolerated. He opens his mouth, and the words hang there for a moment. I've done enough of these interviews to know that there's more than what he wants to say. Or maybe yell. He doesn't, though. Instead, he takes another breath and leans back in his chair and apologizes. Look, he says, I know what I'm going to tell you is going to make me sound crazy or high or whatever the fuck else. I promise you, though, that it happened. And seeing as you're the one who came to me for this interview, the least you can do is listen. I nod. Of course. Entirely reasonable. I circle the word irate on my form. What are you writing? The man asks. Leaning forward, he narrows his eyes at my clipboard as I pull it away. Why won't you show me? It's against protocol. Your knowledge of my nose could influence your account. I prefer such biases were avoided. Now please continue. He licks his lips. They were chapped and cracked. Fine, he says. Like I said, we were drinking in the cabin, swapping old stories from high school, talking about stupid pranks we used to pull or places we'd all hang out or shitty teachers we hated. You know, we reminisced. He taps his finger on the table. Tap, tap, tap. Pretty soon, we got really drunk. The sort of drunk where you stop goofing off and things go deeper. We start talking about our hopes and dreams and our past and futures. You know, the kind of shit that sets your soul on fire. It's very poetic, I say. Are you a writer? Sometimes. As such, would you describe yourself as having an active imagination? He sighs and shakes his head. I describe myself as in the middle of speaking. Thanks. I press my pencil into the clipboard. Undetermined. So we're all drinking, he continues, and Emily gets real low all of a sudden, like mood-wise. She seems down. Emily being the woman who inherited the cabin. He nods. We ask her what's up. Not to be pushy or anything, but just like, as friends, you know? I mean, fuck, we've known each other over 10 years at this point. We care about each other. What does she tell you? He looks down, and there's melancholy in his expression. She tells us why she's never been invited us out there before. I scratch a note on the form, straightening up in my chair. The reason being? Her brother died when we were kids. He drowned to death in the ocean. I frown. Doesn't match the legend. Anything else? He glares at me. Are you serious? Anything else? Yeah, that's it, asshole. Her brother died, and this place reminds her of him. A sad story, but not while we're here. I check a box labeled confrontational. Please continue. He takes a few minutes to think about it. One second. His jaw is clenched and his eyes are boring. Eventually, he takes another drag, breathes out a plume of smoke, and he speaks. Like I said, we're drinking, talking. But like all good things, it comes to an end. Emily stops first. She decides she's ready to head to bed. She's had enough to drink. So she heads back to her tent. That leaves me, Steven, and Haley. Haley's passed out on the couch, and Steven and I chat for a couple hours. Eventually, we both decided it's time to get some shut-eye too. I nod. So far, nothing mentioned warrants the facility's involvement, but I'm keeping an open mind. The police report sounded like Janice after all. According to the police report, I say, rolling my pencil in my fingers, the cabin is where the event occurred. Can you describe it for me? The layout? Sure. He scratches the back of his head and furrows his brow. His pupils dilate in focus as though recalling a memory. It's sort of T-shaped, capital T. It's got 2 bedrooms on either side of the T, with a bathroom at the top of the center. Then there's a living area in the front of the bathroom, and finally at the bottom of the T is the kitchen and the front door. You said the event occurred in the washroom, correct? He takes another drag on a cigarette, burning it down to the filter. His eyes are bloodshot. You got more of these? He asks. Reach inside my jacket and pull out the pack, toss it to him. He eagerly flips it open and slips the smoke out and lights it. So the 4 of you get into your tents. What happens next? He shrugs. I read my book. Your book? Yeah, Mistborn. Ever read it? I shake my head. I don't care for fantasy. What happens after you read the book? Nature calls. I gotta take a shit. So I get up and head to the cabin. It's pitch black outside when I unzip my tent. I can't even see my feet on the ground. Pitch black? Or had your eyes simply not adjusted? Pitch black, he says flatly. The cabin's on a tiny island off the coast of British Columbia. The only light it gets is the moon, maybe the stars. That night it was overcast, so the moonlight came and went with the clouds. You carried a flashlight then? No, just my phone. It uses its light to make my way to the cabin. Once I get inside, I shut the door behind me. I get a weird feeling. Can you describe this feeling? Like I'm being watched. Promising. Continue, I say. The place feels empty. Lonely. It's just me, the spiders, and my phone. He pauses. The light's making shadows out of everything. The dusty fridge, the messy shelves, and the cluttered counters. There's 1,000 shapes all around me, shifting as I walk. And this feeling of, dread comes over me. Like I'm not safe. He clears his throat. But I'm drunk. I'm drunk enough that the feeling doesn't do much to faze me. I shake it off. I laugh. A little. I came to take a shit, and some spooky shadows aren't going to stop me, right? I guess they call it liquid courage for a reason. He laughs at his own joke. A few seconds later, Excuse me. A few seconds later, I'm in the bathroom and locking the door behind me. His legs bouncing up and down on the table. It's shaking on top of it. Would you like a glass of water? I ask, pouring him a cup. I recognize the anxious body language and the insistent licking of the lips. I've seen it before. He waves his hand dismissively. I'm all right. He says but he reaches across and takes a sip anyway. So I'm about to unbuckle and do my business, and I see movement. It's in the corner of the bathroom, like one of those little toilet windows. Like this hype that's clouded on the bottom for privacy, but clear on the top to let light in. I've seen those, I say, nodding. I have one in my bathroom. Is that where the event occurred? He nods, running a hand through his dark hair. That's where I saw the smile. Jagged Janus. Describe it, please. He shakes his head. I'd rather not. Can we discuss the event? The smile is part of the event, I remind him. It's important that we get as many details as possible, no matter how uncomfortable those memories may be. He looks down and his eyes drift out of focus. He's remembering it. The smile. It was a row of teeth, except the teeth were too big and too sharp to belong to a human. And there were just so many of them. I look down at my notes. I read over the description of Jagged Janus as mentioned in old email chains from the early 2000s. I'd like to hear more about her teeth. He bites his lips. Her teeth? Why? The teeth are important. Describe them, please. He's uncomfortable. His voice cracks and his chest sighs, but he gives me what I want. The teeth were jagged, serrated almost. Their length was all over the place. Some barely broke her gums. Others stretched down, pierced her bottom lips. His fingers move again. They're tapping on the metal table. Tap, tap, tap. When I see the smile, my heart starts pounding. I'm frozen there, standing in the dark bathroom with just light from my phone. My mind's reeling. But I know whoever that smile belongs to, I don't want them seeing me. So I hold my phone in my chest and extinguish the light. Did the woman showcase an adverse reaction to the light? Janus, according to her legend, loathed the light. No. Or, I don't know, maybe. I can't remember small details. He's sweating now, his eyes transfixed on the cigarette burning low between his fingers. At that point, my body's mostly just adrenaline. I feel a storm of it coursing through me and screaming at me to run or fight this bitch or do something, anything. But I can't. I just stand there, staring at her human teeth, at her terrible, twisted smile with my phone clutched to my chest like a Christian cross. Then the smile begins to fall away, lowering itself into obscured but foggy part of the glass. But in its place are two eyes. He takes a breath. They're wide, angled all wrong and leaking black fluid. They dart between the washroom, as if looking for something or somebody. I stay still, paralyzed. There's no light, save the moon framing the monster in the window. So I meld into the darkness and pray to fucking God the creature can't see me there. I feel dribble of piss run down my leg. I'm panicking now, completely. I'm losing control of my body. He shivers, taking another long, slow drag on his cigarette. Then I hear the tapping on the window. Tap, tap, tap. It's followed by this chattering sound, and I realize her teeth gnashing together, open and shut, over and over again. I don't want to look at her. But part of me can't stop myself. I glance up at the window, and I see her eyes staring back at me, those two tiny black dots in a sea of white. My breathing stops. My pulse races. It's just the two of us now, watching one another. I lean forward, interested. Much of that description could have been pulled from the Jagged Janus legend itself. The tiny black pupils, the row of inhuman teeth, the gnashing jaws. I check off the features on my clipboard as I go. What happens then? I asked. Then she speaks. It's only 3 words, but it's enough to turn my dribble of piss into a torrent. He swallows, his eyes wide as he recites the words, I see you. I write them down and circle the words 3 times. They're not familiar to me. Did she sound young or old? Describe her voice. He shakes his head, shuddering. The voice was quiet, hard to hear. The words sounded like they had been pulled out of a wood chipper. The pronunciation was broken and unnatural, like they were cut up by those teeth. Curious. Continue. Her fingers reach up and she taps the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. I chance another look, and all I can see is that terrible serrated smile. I look away, but I know I need to watch her. I have to monitor her because who the fuck knows what this creature is gonna do. So I look back up, and the smile's gone, and so is the woman. It's just me. He puts his face in his hands, and his shoulders quake in silent sobs. A minute passes, and it appears we've reached the end of his account. A harrowing experience, I say, giving my notes to a final swipe with my pencil. I straighten up in my chair, flattening the front of my jacket and reaching out to shake his hand. On behalf of the facility, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share this with us. His sobs taper off, and he's quiet for a moment. He looks up from his hands, and his eyes are red and his voice is shaking. It's not over, he says. There's more. Pull back my handshake. My apologies. Something else occurred? Yes, he says. The next few hours turned into a nightmare. And that's it.
There's a part 2.
There's a part 2. Do you want to read the part 2?
You can read the part 2.
Okay. I'm gonna actually. So we're gonna do a new poll. I forgot to get rid of the additional votes. I want this to be just straight, regular votes.
Gotcha.
That way there's no potential rigging. I forgot to do that. Okay.
Gotcha.
So best story. Mr. Green Elite. Let's see, Schwolf. I don't know how to exactly spell that, but I know who it is. And Hex, the Necromancer. Okay. Guys, we're starting the poll again. Because I forgot to remove the thing. So let's go on ahead. While Rev is reading his the part 2 to the story, go on ahead and put your vote in.
All right. If you see a woman with a serrated smile, you need to read this as a matter of life and death. Part 2, the finale. I settle back into my chair. Already, there's plenty of details that indicate the presence of Jagged Janus on that sleepy island, but I could always use more. The man clears his throat, and I listen intently as he resumes his account. It takes 10 minutes for me to muster the courage to crack the bathroom door. I do it gently, quietly. You can hardly hear the shitty hinges creak. That's how careful I am. I peer out of the crack, looking for the smiling woman, terrified that I'm going to see her standing in the living area waiting for me, but I don't. Nobody else is in the cabin. It's just me. So I step out across the hardwood floor. It creaks and groans with each step I take, and each time it does, my heart skips a beat, and I expect to see her jump out of the darkness. He shudders. I'm seeing that smile everywhere now, in every shadow and every window. I want to shout and scream, and I want to call out to my friends and beg them to pull me out of this horror, but they're beyond the cabin door, out there at the far end of the yard. They're a world away. Just a moment, I say, placing the clipboard down. You never thought to use your phone to call for help? Weren't you listening? He says I was on a backwater island off the coast of rural BC. I didn't even have spotty service. There was nothing. My phone was a glorified fucking flashlight. Thank you for clarifying. I mark on my clipboard to investigate the service signal in the area. If it turns out there is cellular service, then it's possible he's lied about the other aspects of his account. A disappointing prospect. Continue. Our tents are in the far end of the yard, so I'm psyching myself up to book it out the front door. I've got my hand on the knob and I'm ready to fling it open and scream bloody murder, and that's when I hear it. His fingers thumb the metal desk. Tap, tap, tap. I look at the window beside the front door and I see a long arm and a frayed sleeve with crooked fingers playing against the glass. They're drumming a melody, but it's discordant, strange. It's not music, but more like noise masquerading as song. He drops his burnt cigarette into the ashtray and reaches for another. I hear her voice again. You, she says in this gravely guttural voice. The tapping gets faster and heavier. I pull away from the front door and fall back to the shadows of the cabin. He lights the smoke and brings it to his lips and pauses. I see her head crane around to the window. Her eyes gleam in the moonlight, darting around, swiveling in ways they shouldn't be able to. She's searching again for something. For me, maybe. I don't know. He pulls on the cigarette, coughing as he spits out a lungful of smoke. I slide the glass of water across the table toward him, and he picks it up and slams the entire thing. When he's finished, he wipes some of the wetness from his chin and continues. And she's gone. Again? I ask, mildly exasperated. There's no part of Janice's legend that indicated her vanishing. He nods. I'm alone and time passes. Minutes, maybe hours. He shakes his head. I just sit there in the living room, my ears and eyes straining for any sound, any movement, anything. I'm trembling and breathing in short bursts and terrified if I breathe too much or too heavily, she'll hear me. I wonder how long it's been. I wonder how long until morning comes and somebody wakes up and comes to check on me or use the washroom. I think about using my phone to check the time, but the idea of its backlight revealing my position terrifies me, so I don't. I leave it be and I sit there a while longer. I make several notations on my clipboard: terror, inability to move, shadows. I circle the words with a sigh. Sleep paralysis? I look up at him, wondering how likely it is that this whole experience may be nothing more than a bad dream. Still, the possibility of it being a true account is too valuable to ignore. So, then did you wait until the morning? He laughs. Another drag. Fuck no, he says. It took a while, but eventually I had enough. I got calmer and maybe just more desperate. I don't know. Maybe I just needed to know that my nightmare had an ending. I make a mark on my form indicating him referencing the experience as a nightmare. Beside it, I scrawl the words confession, sleep paralysis. So did you check your phone then? Yeah. He gnaws at his fingernails. A nervous response often correlated with lying, but not necessarily. I'm quivering as I pull the phone from my pocket. My finger presses the power button and my home screen comes to life. It's a stupid Sonic background and it bathes my face in a blue glow. What time is it? It was 3:34 a.m., about 2 hours from sunrise. He takes a deep breath, takes a breath long and deep. So I put my phone back in my pocket, deciding that I can't wait another 2 hours. I need to do something now before that woman comes back. I tell myself to make a run for it. First, though, I need to wake up my friends. I don't want to make myself an easy target, so I open my mouth to scream and run headlong out the cabin door and toward the tents and maybe make it out of here alive. And he pauses, tears coming down his face. He's whimpering now. I tap my pencil rhythmically on the clipboard, my impatience getting the better of me. And a hand, long and crooked, wraps itself around my mouth. Something pulls my head back and I smell rotten decay, and a voice whispers in my ear, I you. I raise an eyebrow, but you got away? He shrugs, sashing a cigarette in the glass tray. Guess so. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed surrounded by my friends. The ones from the cabin? Yeah. Check the box labeled survivor. I chew on the eraser of my pencil for a second before checking one more box. Post-traumatic stress affected. They're all telling me it's their fault, he says. Emily's mumbling about how we never should have come to the cabin. Steven's talking about how he and I should have never done mushrooms that afternoon. Haley's blaming herself for dozing off and letting Steven and I get exceptionally drunk. He gives a bittersweet smile. Everybody wants a share of the guilt. One might say that they've earned it, I say, hardly masking my disappointment. It's possible that you did have a case of hallucinatory distress. I don't think so. At that point, the mushrooms had worn off hours ago. Hell, by the end of it, I wasn't even still drunk. I make a note from the form indicating the subject believed themselves sober at the time of the event. You said the island was quite remote. I'm assuming the hospital wasn't local to it? No, it was off the island, an hour or so inland. The man takes a breath as though happy that the hardest part is over. Must have been out for a day at least because I don't remember traveling there. My interest peaks again. A recurring aspect of the Janus mythology is a sense of mild amnesia as well as the presence of minor to severe bite wounds. What did the hospital treat you for? He coughs, clearing his throat. A mild concussion as well as water in my lungs. Water in your lungs? I toss my pencil down in disbelief. Seriously? He shrugs. The doctor didn't understand either. Okay, so your friends leave get well cards, you get discharged a couple days later, and now you're here. I lean back in my steel chair, folding my arms. Is that pretty much it? Not exactly, he says darkly. Before they left, I mentioned the smiling woman to them. I sigh, leaning forward. Could you use exact phrasing? Sure. He shifts uncomfortable. It's when they're apologizing, take the blame for everything. I interrupt them and ask them a question, but my voice is like sandpaper, so I have to do it twice. There was this woman, I say. She was smiling in the cabin window. Did any of you see her? Stephen and Haley shake their heads. They rub my arm. They tell me I was tripping. They tell me it was a mistake to mix mushrooms and alcohol. They tell me this is their fault all over again, like they're not listening to a word I'm saying. But Emily's standing back. She's staring at me, and her eyes are filled with something like regret. Her hands find her pockets, and she buries them and looks away. Say her name. She knows something, and I can tell. Seen the woman too, maybe. My pencil slides down the interview form, circling a word that says witness and annotating it with a small question mark. Did you confront her about this? No, he says with a sigh. She left the room too quickly. I don't think she wanted to speak about it, at least not in front of Haley and Steven. That night, I was alone. My hospital room was cramped and silent. The only company I had was the apple tree outside my window. It took me a long time to fall asleep, but eventually I did. I settled back into my chair, folding my arms and listening. Feels as if this might be nothing more than a hallucination after all. There's simply too many departures from the mythology. I woke up to tapping, the sound of fingers on glass. My eyes snapped open and I stared out the window, fucking horrified. But it was just the apple tree. Some of its branches were brushing against the window and making the tapping sound. He chuckles. So I roll over and go back to sleep, wondering if this was what my life is going to be like from now on. Panicking every time I hear a branch on a window or a face in a window. That's that when the doors creak. I frown. To your hospital room? He nods. I start freaking out. My breath hitches in my chest. My body tenses. I know that this is it. The smiling woman's back for real this time. But it's only Emily. She pauses in the doorway and asks me if she can come in. I tell her, of course. She closes the door behind her. She doesn't bother turning on the lights, and as she draws closer, passing through the shafts of moonlight, I see her eyes heavy with bags, her posture slouched, and the wetness of tears on her cheek. She looks exhausted, devastated. I'm sorry, she said, wiping snot on her sleeve. I'm sorry, I thought she was gone. So, I say, flipping back a page on my clipboard, she knew about the woman after all. I found the spot I'd annotated witness and erased the question mark. Yeah, the man says. She said a woman attacked her brother when they were both kids. She said the memory wasn't great because she was maybe 4 years old at the time, but that she remembered him being dragged backwards by his face. She said the woman was smiling the entire time and kept repeating into the sea with you over and over again. The man pauses, his voice getting lower as he speaks. The woman held him beneath the surf until he drowned. Then she let the waves take him. Disturbing. I tapped the pencil thoughtfully against my chin. And she never brought this up to her parents? She did. Her father told her it was just her imagination. He said that her brother had fallen into the ocean and got swept away, and it was already hard enough to deal without Emily adding to it, so Emily just buried the memory and moved on. The man looks up at me, his expression despondent. Then he brings a fingernail to his mouth. That's when we heard it, he says, in the hospital room. A tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the window to my right, the one with the old apple tree. Was it the woman? I don't know. He shrugs. I didn't look. I told her not to look either. Emily, I told her to just look at me and focus on me. I didn't know what she saw as a little girl down by the ocean, but I knew I didn't want her to see what I'd seen. He shuddered. I didn't want her to see that smile. Did she listen to you? Shakes his head slowly, unhappily. His hand grips a fistful of his own hair. She looked, and when she did, she screamed. She screamed so loud that the lights came on down the hall, and I heard the overnight nurse call out. Then Emily rushed to the window, and I still refused to look, but I heard her beating against it with her fist, clawing at it with her nails. The nurse burst in shortly after and found Emily weeping on the floor. He pulled her out of my room and got a patrol car to drive her home. The man takes a breath. He puts his face in his hands and rubs his eyes. I text her shortly after. He says, yes. I look at the folder on my desk labeled correspondence and then down at the watch on my wrist. It's already more than a half hour past the end of my shift. If the texts are everything that's left, I can read them on my own. I rise from the desk and offer my hand to shake. He gives it a weak squeeze, avoiding my eyes, then leaves the room with my pack of smokes and not another word. I sigh, sitting back down in the chair. Another long day, another dead end. I adjust my glasses and pull out the text logs. There's only one sheet with a handful of message receipts. The chance is slim, but the possibility that there's something in there about Janice entices me. The allure of having years of my personal research validated proves too much to resist. I begin to read. As I do, I make a note of the timestamps. In my experience, they often paint a picture deeper than the words. 1:30 a.m. Dorian. Are you okay? 2:12 Emily. Not really. 2:12 Dorian. Did you see her? Dorian. I'm sorry, that was a stupid text. Emily, it's fine. Dorian, I'm guessing you don't feel like talking? Emily, actually, it might be good for me. Dorian, yeah, me too. I never got a chance to tell you earlier. I can't imagine how horrible it must have felt to see what happened to your brother and have your dad not believe you. That's fucked. Then unsent message says, "My bad. We don't have to talk about heavy shit if you don't want to. Did you finish your book on the book you're on?" Uh, Emily, it's fine. We were never close, anyways. I'm sorry to hear that. Did you ever tell your mom? No, my mother was already dying by then. Dad would have killed me. Fuck, I'm an asshole. How could I forget something like that? I'm sorry again. You're not an asshole. As long as I've known you, Julie hasn't been my stepmom. She's just been my mom. It's fine. I'd honestly be shocked if you remembered anything about my birth mom. I mean, even I hardly do. Well, thanks for trying to make me feel like less of a dick. I appreciate it. Besides, you're right. I am? About what? You're right that I would have told her about Jonas if I could have. But by then, she was so hopped up on painkillers that I hardly recognized her, though. The meds must have been pretty heavy. That's a lot to deal with for a 4-year-old kid. Yeah, her esophageal cancer was bad. She was in a lot of pain near the end. Pretty sure my ass of a father was having an affair at the time, too. I'm sorry. That's a shitty memory to bring up. Don't be. I actually wanted to thank you. It's a memory I'd forgotten. I think I repressed a lot of old memories of her. I can't tell if you're pissed or not. Are you sure you're okay? Yeah. Honestly, if it wasn't for you, I'd probably think I was going crazy right now. What? I saw her too. The smiling woman? Em? Is everything okay? Who did you see? See my mother. Stare at the last word in stunned silence. Her mother. Could she actually have been the origin of the legend? I rub a hand along my jaw, considering what I've heard of Emily's history. She only been 4 years old at the time of her brother's death when she witnessed a woman drag him into the sea. Could that woman have been her own mother? Unlikely, but not impossible. Children often reframe moments of terror to understand the incomprehensible. I reach for my briefcase, unclasping the latches on the front, and pull out my laptop, and I take a breath and then open up the database software. Emily's easy enough to find. Her last name is plastered everywhere across her social media, so I plug that in. The search function isn't the fastest, but it does the trick. It takes 30 seconds for the tiny rotating hourglass to stop spinning, and when it does, I see her. Subject: Emily Caldwell. Father: Hank Caldwell. Mother: Janice Caldwell, deceased. I swallow, my hands shaking on the keyboard. Had I finally found Jagged Janice? I pour myself a glass of water, finishing it in 2 big gulps. It does little to calm my nerves. Still, it's one piece of the puzzle solved, but really it just creates more questions. It doesn't explain several aspects of the man's story: the water in the lungs, the vanishing. Certain pieces don't add up, at least not when compared against the original legend. I hear a knock on the door, 3 sharp raps with a knuckle. I get up to answer it, thinking maybe the man's forgotten his phone or wants to give me back my pack of smokes, and when I open it, though, there's no one. I raise an eyebrow and head back to my laptop. I need to discover the source of these changes, these departures from the Jagged Janus mythology. This time I bring up my web browser, navigating to one of my preferred resources on urban legends. The website's a bit corny, but it's proven accurate, and its community aspect has been invaluable in my research. After some scrolling, I bring up the Jagged Janus article. People can leave anecdotal encounters beneath the main text, and sometimes they do. Usually they're all bullshit, and it's simple enough to tell at a glance, but sometimes one of them catches my eye. It mentions seeing the serrated smile, the tapping fingers, and that they found their infant child dead with water in its lungs. I shake my head. Bullshit, clearly. I prayed at least the infant was still alive or that the poster was some teenager with nothing better to do. I keep scrolling. I see more keywords. There and then gone. Voice like a meat grinder. To the sea with you. I pause, swallowing. To the sea with you. Those were the words the man had mentioned that Emily said. Words she remembered when she witnessed her brother being pulled into the ocean. To the sea with you. My mind spins, but a picture is forming. The guttural, difficult to understand voice. The drowned brother. I see you. No, she was never saying I see you. She was saying to the sea with you. The man couldn't understand it though, and she was in such a panic that he defaulted to the or he was in such a panic that he defaulted to the simplest phrasing. My heart races. I reach for my phone to make a call to tell my boss what I found. It wasn't long ago the facility had an incident with a man with a red notepad, one in which we learned the core principle of all legends, and one which cost many people their lives. That legends evolve. The Jack and Janus legend has evolved, and We need to allocate additional resources to locating it and neutralizing it. I continue to scroll, noticing many of the anecdotes have been posted in the last week, several in the last few days. If even half of them are true, then it'd imply highly increased activity on Janice's part. I hear another knock at the door, 3 soft raps, and I curse, kicking off from my desk and storming to the door, phone still pressed to my face, waiting for my boss to pick up. Once more, I swing it open, and once more, I look down the cold, empty hallway. Nothing. I slam the door shut and stalk back to the table. My phone continues to ring, and my boss continues to ignore my call. It's really not like her, but I tell myself to relax. She's probably in the middle of supper. I check the watch on my wrist and frown. The display reads 3:34 a.m., which can't be right. It was 6 o'clock only 20 minutes ago. I heave a sigh, adding broken wristwatch to my list of problems. Then 3 more knocks. Have to confess, I'm getting fed up. I'm going to leave this here for now, as it appears my interviewee is having some fun at my expense. Either that or, well, that isn't really a possibility I'd like to entertain. On second thought, I'll post this before I go, just in case. And that is where the story ends.
Damn.
Neat.